morning. It is time to talk about the best books that I read this year. Now, of course, this list is subjective. These are books that I like. You might not like these books. The general, area of Book Talk, Bookstagram, BookTube might not like these books. But that's okay. That's okay. These are books that brought me joy and that I enjoyed this year, and I wanted to share them with you in case maybe one of them sparks your interest and you like it. Now, because I've talked about a lot of these books already on the channel, you might kind of be guessing what they are. I did limit the list to 10, even though I had probably about 15 5 stars, but I had a few that were repeats. I read Night like twice a year, and it's always a 5 star for me whenever I teach the kids. And I love pretty much any audiobook that's got cool immersive things in the back, but I didn't want to talk about Haunting of Hill House twice, and I've talked about them previously. So these are just regular books that I've read that I haven't talked about yet. Now, I also don't have physical copies of all of them, so I'll put up a picture if I have read it and I don't have it. Some of them I enjoyed and took to my classroom library. Some of them I just read via ebook or audiobook, so you'll see when we get there. This video is going to be kind of short because maybe not as short as the worst books, but definitely kind of short. I just didn't have any that spoke to me the way books normally do this year. Not that there aren't books here that are absolutely going to speak to me, but I'm over explaining it. I had a mid-year for reading. I had a really mid-year. I found a couple of hitters, and then everything else just existed as a book. And I think that's sad, and I think that's a me problem. I don't know if maybe I'm just getting a little bit worn out from reading, or I'm getting worn out from other things and it's affecting reading, but either way, it just felt like everything was it existed. It certainly was a book. So these are really important because they stood out in the midst of all that mid. So let's get started in no particular order. I'm going to pull from this stack here, and then I'll tell you about the books I don't physically have. And the first one on the stack is Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe. Now, I read this for the Gina Card Deck Challenge for 2024 for a book featuring a restaurant or food truck, and I didn't know what I was getting into. I've never seen the movie. I've never heard anything about it besides people usually put edits on my TikTok of the two main ladies in here, and very suggestive things because it's, supposedly gay. And I'm here to confirm it's pretty gay book. It is gay in the way books of this time can be gay, and movies of this time can be gay, and I think that if you like slice of life literature and literature where people are confronting who they are and good and bad, but it's small town vibes, this is a good one for you. It was a very quick read. I thought it was very fun that the past with Iggy and Ruth, and the present with Mrs. Threadgood and Evelyn were separated by these little newspaper things that this lady was writing about Whistle Stop. And I don't know, maybe it's because I'm from a very small town that this just felt like something that would happen. Like we would have a lesbian couple with a son that ran a restaurant beside a train track. I don't know. It was just kind of heartwarming, in that really cheesy way that you want it to be. And I did tear up a little bit at the end because I didn't expect some of the stuff to happen. But this was a very easy 5-star read for me. The next in this pile is The Memory Police. And I will admit to not having looked at this since April or May. And when I saw it was a 5-star, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And I had to remind myself why this was a 5-star. This is a 5-star because it is the perfect literary speculative fiction for me, where this woman exists in a place where things are forgotten, and when they're forgotten, you all forget them and they go away. But there are people who do not forget. There are people who have memories of green ribbons and tomatoes and birds, and they aren't able to forget, and so they're a dangerous thing to have because everyone else is supposed to forget them. To me, and I know this is me being so pretentious, it's such a metaphor for grief, and maybe it's because of when I read this was not long after we lost a family member. Not letting yourself explore and be sad. They don't remember things because it could hurt them, and the main character even explains it that way. Well, it must be a painful memory if we're supposed to forget it. Things being painful doesn't mean you avoid it. It means you find ways to deal with it and to look at it, and I don't know. I felt it was a very, very good representation of that. This whole thing of if you don't explore your grief, the grief is going to get you. They eventually forget themselves. She forgets parts of her body. This is, it's not healthy to not feel, is basically what this is. And I highly recommend it, especially if you like literary fiction and you're into that sort of thing. I read this fully physically. I did not do an audiobook with this, so I can't recommend or not recommend that one, but this, 10 out of 10. Another book on the list that came from the Gina Card Deck Challenge is Lady Macbeth. I read this one for Read Something You Own on Kindle, and I actually have 2 copies of this. I have this one, and I have this one with the cool red and black pages. And I'm hoping to get the Owl Crate one at some point because I loved this book. I thought it was really short, sweet, to the point. It's a retelling of Macbeth, or reimagining of Macbeth from the point of view of Lady Macbeth, who is like this ambitious, power-hungry person in Macbeth, and then she can't follow through with it. That's probably the worst part about her character. She spends the whole time being like, you ain't shit, and you don't want anything bad enough. If I was a man, I would be able to do this, this, and this. You should kill that man. And then in like the end of the thing, she's like, I can't deal with the guilt. I'll just kill myself off screen. Me personally, but anyway, this is a really good retelling of her as sort of this hag seed, untouchable person, and she's sent to marry this foreign king and become his bride. And she actually isn't really ambitious. She's more just protecting herself. The thing she chooses to do is to keep him out of her bedroom, which respect. And then she meets a prince from a different place when they go to kill the king, and there's sort of a romance in here. It's more or less a monster romance because, I mean, she's a witch and he's something else. I will let you read. But it's really short. I think that it's easy to pick up. It didn't take me but like a week to read it, and that's because I was teaching, so I had to keep stopping. But highly recommend. I think the language is very good. Ava Reed is really great at like creating an atmosphere, and she definitely does that here. You can feel like the cold, wet stones of this castle. You can like feel the fabric of things. You can feel the viscera when actual violence happens, because it does happen. If you've read Macbeth, people die. So I truly recommend this. Easy 5 stars. Moving on. The next book I read was mostly consumed on audiobook, but I went out and bought the physical copy because I loved it that much, and it is Behind You Is the Sea. Behind You Is the Sea is, how do I explain it? It's a bunch of little stories. It's a little book. It's a bunch of little stories about one Palestinian family and sort of their connection to where home is and what home is. And it ranges from older characters to like millennial characters. So you've got like young Gen Z kids in school. Like one of the most powerful ones to me was the teenager whose school is doing Aladdin, and she's talking about how kind of weird it is that they're doing that when they don't have a lot of Arab students. That doesn't seem appropriate. And if she's even needs to have that fight, because that puts kind of a target on her as a problem. And the overarching sort of theme is this guy whose father has passed away, and he is trying to get him buried back in Palestine, and how many hurdles he has to go through to do that. And I don't know. It was a very lovely little audiobook to listen to. I'm probably going to pick this up again because, again, it is very short to read, so I can get more out of it reading it again. If you haven't read it, highly recommend. It almost reads like poetry, even though it is prose. I can't stop myself from talking about books that I read for the Card Deck Challenge, and this happened to be the first book that I read for the Card Deck Challenge. A Man Called Ove is a story about Timothy. Rude. That was the cat. Speaking of like interrupting things, A Man Called Ove is about a man named Ove trying to off himself because he is old and feels like he has nothing else to give to the world. His wife is dead. He has lost his job, and a family keeps interrupting him. A family that is just absolutely goofy and silly and full of life, and they keep dragging him into things. And it's so darkly funny that every few chapters he's like, okay, this will be the way I do it now. And they still managed to interrupt him. And it's still a very bittersweet ending. It did make me cry quite a bit, even though you sort of start to sense what's going to happen. But I don't know. It was so beautiful. And Frederick Bachman, this is my second book by him. He's so good at writing people and people's stories that you really, really connect with the folks in it. Now, I'm hoping that a goal I can have in 2025 is to finish the Beartown series, because I've heard the whole thing is very good. But I will definitely be picking up Bachman in the future when I can, because it's been good every time. The last physical book I have here to talk about is another one I read very early in the year. It's like I hit all my 5s in like January and February. But anyway, it's There Goes the Neighborhood. And There Goes the Neighborhood by Jade Ada it's about a group of kids trying to save their neighborhood from gentrification by inventing a fake gang. um, and it's shenanigans, but it gets pretty serious because one of their friends is actually accused of being in this gang, and they have to try to kind of help him. I loved the interaction with the characters. It felt like teenagers. Like I work with teenagers, and so sometimes reading YA gets annoying because they don't talk like that. They don't think about that kind of stuff. You, as a 30-year-old author, are thinking that these kids aren't. And I feel like Jade Ada really, she internalized the way these kids focus on things and how their sort of like risk taking and decision making is different because they don't have a fully developed frontal lobe. And so, yeah, of course, it makes sense to create a fake gang and like tag things and post stuff that this gang is have violence in our city, because you don't see how that's going to affect the rest of the city and you guys. Like, you don't see that through. You're only seeing maybe this will keep our friends from having to move. And I just think that's a really good representation of kids. Like, this is really good. And I've recommended it to quite a few teenagers that I teach because it also has that aspect of teenagerdom where you have very big passions for things. And if sometimes that passion is for like social injustice, it gets a little bit dicey. Highly recommend this. It's very easy to read. You're going to love the characters. And yeah, 5 stars. Another book that is on my favorites that I do not have a physical copy of, though I probably will buy one, is How High We Go in the Dark. I read this one for the Asian American and Pacific Islander Month challenge and loved it. I had it up on my Kindle, reading it at school on my computer, and it's a story about a plague that gets unearthed because people are drilling under ice, and a girl dies finding it, and her father comes up to sort of get her affairs in order. And every story is about different people, and some of them connect, like their mothers and sons, or they're a cousin or someone who dated this person. But all the stories are so different, and they take place in certain amounts of time after this plague. Like, one of them is about a amusement park that exists literally to euthanize children in a humane way with this roller coaster, and it's about the kid who like works there, and he falls in love with this lady whose son is going to ride the roller coaster. There's stories of, oh my gosh, people going into space and traveling to see if there's somewhere else to live, and of course they find out, they found a way to cure the plague. And just this, the very humanness of it, that in the very last chapter is revealed to be something very different. I don't want to talk about any more of that because I think you really do need to read it the way it's intended and in order to kind of get at what the point is of this story. And it's just a literary speculative fiction. That's always going to eat with me, so it had to go on the list. The next book that I do not have a physical copy of, even though I thought I did, I think I've just moved it somewhere or I've taken it to my classroom, is The Underwater Welder, which is a story about a man who is a underwater welder. He dives underwater to weld these like oil rigs, and it feels like a Twilight Zone episode. He is thinking all the time about his dad. His dad went missing when he was a kid, and he's got a lot of guilt about why his dad went missing, and he is about to be a father himself. And so it's sort of him confronting these things he's held against his father and trying not to become like his dad and be an alcoholic. And he goes into this sort of upside down world thing while diving one day, and has to kind of confront this. He has to confront why his father went missing and what he feels about that and how he's going to change and be better for his kid. And I loved it. I thought the art was gorgeous. I love when a graphic novel can make the art and the story work together really well, and this one definitely did. So it was easily going to be on my favorites list this year. I still have it physically. I mean, it's in here. I'm just not going to go hunting for it. The next book on here is actually one of the books I read for school. I don't have a copy of it. I will probably buy a copy, but I did send it back. I'd rented it for class, and it is April Baker Bell's Linguistic Justice, and it's about teaching Black language to students, because Black language is a language. It has the same rule systems that any other language would, and I love that it prioritizes not using a colorblind teaching method. So colorblind being like, oh, I don't see color, and you have the code switch, so it's okay to talk to your friends this way, but you can't talk this way in class, and you can't talk this way at work. Well, why can't you? Oh, because it's seen as inappropriate. Why is it seen as inappropriate? And it's seen as inappropriate because we have let white perspectives of things leech onto the way our children talk. And it's not a bad language. It's just as valuable as a language as anything else. And teaching code switching can internally negate this language for kids. It can make them feel that they are doing something wrong, that they are in some way bad. And I teach in a majority, like, Black and African American school. Like, these kids do not look like me. They do not talk like me. I'm from this area, so I can usually understand what's going on. But we have really good discussions in grammar about Black language and about why this rule means this versus this, and when is it appropriate to use it and when is it not. And my feeling of it has always been that it's always appropriate if the meaning was there. I'm always going to be more about content over form. So if you wrote in quote unquote Black language and I still understood what you meant to say, then you still did the assignment correctly. Now, their problem is going to be that they're going to come across school and they're going to come across college and jobs that don't view that way. But that's what this book really did, was emphasize why we should still be pushing it, because we've got to get into a better world where their language is always seen as valuable. We've got to impress upon these kids how cool it is that they speak 2 languages. Some of these kids speak 3 languages, and how important that is to put that like power and impact into these kids. We want them to value themselves and value the words that they have to use. And so I just really love this. It was a good textbook, had a lot of great lesson plans and ideas in it to sort of confront those stereotypes that kids innately have that have been pushed on them by teachers and staff in schools. So I don't know that I'll be doing it word for word, because it's going to be coming a little bit different from me than it would be someone who has lived the experience of having to code switch like them. But I will definitely be looking into unpacking these grammar rules with my kids when we do our regular grammar instruction. So linguistic justice, if it's very short, if you're looking for something that's kind of cool, nonfiction, I would look into that. The last one on this list that I don't have, that I know I don't have because I put it in my classroom library, is How It Went Down. Oh my God, this was a 10 out of 10 recommendation from one of my students. She was like, have you seen this book? You would probably like it. And I did. It is the story of a boy who is shot and how everyone sort of thinks they know what happened. These guys know that it's because he was carrying a gun because he was with this gang, and these guys know he would never join this gang, and this girl is helping with this because she wants to be seen, and this guy's doing it because he wants to be elected. And it is so layered with nuance, and at the end you still don't really know how it went down. You don't know why the kid was shot. You don't know what he had on him to make him worth shooting in the eyes of the press. And it's just, I enjoy that. I like the ambiguous ending, because that's not the point. The point is how all these people reacted to it and how they politicized it or used it for their own selfish gains or used it to sort of boost up how they viewed themselves. Like, I don't know. It was just such a good, like, realistic book. And again, a really great description of teenagers and how they would view events like this and how they would be very black and white in their viewpoint of it. It's not that they can't see gray areas or nuance. It's just that in the heat of the moment, right is right and wrong is wrong. So, love that. Definitely recommend, especially if you have like teenagers who are into social justice movements. This is a really great kind of perspective for them. That's it. Those are my best books, or like, as best as they're going to get for this year. Like I said, I have kind of had a mid-year, but I think those were really good. And if any of them seemed interesting to you, I am going to list all the titles in the description so you can find them with their authors. Most of them have an audiobook. That's my life. And let me know what you read that you really liked this year, if there are any things that like really stood out to you, and I can add them to my TBR for 2025. But otherwise, that is it. I'm going to go. I'm going to drink my coffee. Bye. You guys, look at my nails. They were wicked. So I had green here and I had pink here, but I think I'm going to go Christmas, right? With the magnet. Oh, that's so pretty. But I have to redo the green now. So don't judge me for my nails. And when they start looking funny in these videos, no judgments allowed. That is embarrassing. Oh my God, it's not even November anymore. Jesus, take the wheel. We interrupted regularly scheduled programming to fix whatever the heck is wrong with me. And I thought this was a good idea. I like the idea of a perpetual calendar, but that means I have to change it. And I am lazy. Oh my God. I couldn't let the video continue without fixing this. It is currently the 22nd. Oh my God. get it together. Okay. Okay. Is that better? Is that better? I still don't like that you can see it, but it's gonna be funny if you notice that it changed. Anyway, I'm gonna film the actual video now.